The table was glowing that night. Candles flickered gently, casting little halos of light around the faces I loved. I moved between courses and conversation, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder now and then, feeling proud of the home we'd built, or thought we had. There was laughter, wine, the clinking of forks against ceramic, and for a while, everything felt whole. Marie and Victor were there, my oldest friends. Seeing them always brought back a sense of familiarity, like slipping into a favorite sweater. Then there was Lena and Raphael, newer to our circle, but something about them felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Lena, in particular, seemed distracted. Her eyes kept darting toward Raphael, as if watching for something that hadn't happened yet. I tried to pull her into small talk, asking about their trip to the coast, but her answers were clipped, her smile strained. Raphael, on the other hand, looked oblivious, or maybe he was pretending. I watched him pour another glass of wine, avoiding Lena's gaze. The tension between them clung to the air like the scent of the roast I'd spent all afternoon perfecting. Still, I brushed it off. Every couple has their moments, right? We were well into dessert, a pear tart with lavender cream, something I was quietly proud of, when Lena suddenly put down her fork. Her voice, though small, sliced through the chatter. "Let's play a game," she said. "A trust game. Everyone reads the last 3 messages their partner sent today. No exceptions." The room went quiet for a second, then a few chuckles filled the air. I looked around. Some were amused, others clearly weren't. And Daniel, well, he looked like someone had pulled the chair out from under him. I glanced at Daniel, expecting a laugh, a smirk, even a sarcastic eye roll. But instead, I saw his jaw tighten. His hand gripped the base of his wineglass just a little too firmly. "That's ridiculous," he muttered. "What are we, in high school?" I tilted my head. "Come on," I said, trying to keep the mood light. "It's just a silly game. We're grown-ups. What do we have to hide?" He didn't answer right away, just stared down at his plate as if it might rescue him from the moment. My stomach flickered, not from doubt, but from surprise. Why so defensive? Lena's eyes never left Raphael. "If there's nothing to hide, then there's nothing to worry about," she said, voice soft but edged with steel. I caught the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her glass. Everyone around the table was still, waiting, deciding whether to laugh it off or lean in. And I, naive, loyal, maybe even a little smug, gave Daniel's hand a reassuring squeeze. "Let's do it," I said, my voice steady. "I love games that remind us how strong we are." He looked at me then, really looked. And something flickered behind his eyes that I couldn't name. Phones began unlocking. One by one, the couple started reading. Flirty notes, grocery reminders, silly emojis, all the mundane pieces of shared lives. There were laughs, blushes, playful nudges. I smiled, letting it warm me, because this was what trust looked like, wasn't it? Simple, transparent, unshaken. I reached for Daniel's phone with a casual ease, not even bothering to ask. That's how sure I was of him. That's how sure I'd always been. I didn't know it yet, but I was already standing on the edge of something, and the fall had just begun. The screen lit up in my hands. His passcode hadn't changed, another small, foolish reassurance. I scrolled without fear, eyes searching for something light, something forgettable. And then, something stopped me. A message. Not buried deep, but recent. Bold. I read it once, thinking I misunderstood. Then again, the words didn't change. "I can't stop thinking about your lips last night. You drive me crazy." My breath caught, like someone had slapped me without moving. I didn't say anything at first. My body kept working, eyes blinking, fingers holding the phone. But inside, something cracked. I felt the weight of the room shift, even before I spoke. The laughter had quieted. My silence had volume. My voice came out low, deliberate. "I can't stop thinking about your lips last night," I read aloud. "You drive me crazy." You could have heard a fork drop. Daniel didn't speak. I think part of him was hoping I'd stop there. But something made me keep scrolling, maybe instinct, maybe rage dressed as curiosity. That's when I saw her name. Marie, my best friend. The one who'd held my hair back through morning sickness. The one who'd cried at our wedding. I tapped the thread and let it open. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. The texts were explicit, repetitive, addictive. Like two people who'd been doing this a while, not a mistake, not a one-time fall. This was ritual. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I simply turned the phone toward Victor. He was chewing his last bite of tart. I said gently, "You might want to see this." He took the phone, confused, until he saw her name. His eyes scanned the messages, and then all the color drained from his face. And that was the moment everything changed. For a moment, no one breathed. It felt like the air itself had frozen, heavy with betrayal. Victor held the phone like it was burning through his skin, his eyes flicking between the screen and Marie. She wouldn't look at him. Her shoulders were stiff, her face pale. Daniel still hadn't said a word. He just stared at the table, jaw clenched, like he could will himself invisible. My heart didn't race. It slowed, as if time had thickened around me. I felt strangely calm, as though watching it all from the ceiling, floating above the wreckage of my life. I'd always wondered what betrayal looked like up close. Now I knew. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It was quiet, cold. A shattering so internal that no one sees the pieces fall. I looked at Marie, this woman who'd once been my second home, and I saw her blink fast, like maybe she thought if she didn't cry, it wouldn't be real. I waited for her to speak, to explain, to beg. But she just sat there frozen. Daniel finally moved, reaching for the phone like it could change the outcome if he got to it fast enough. I pushed his hand away. He opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. "Don't," I said. "Not yet." My voice didn't tremble, maybe because all my nerves had been scorched clean. I looked at the screen again, just to make sure I wasn't dreaming, but the words were still there, still filthy, still alive with proof. I turned to Victor, whose hands were now shaking. "You didn't know either, did you?" I asked. His mouth parted slightly, but he couldn't speak, just shook his head. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in this moment. I wasn't the only one who'd been lied to. Victor looked like a man watching his entire house burn down, but still holding the matches, unsure how they got there. He finally managed a few words, barely audible. "How long?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. Marie stayed silent. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white, mouth pressed shut like it might betray her too. I didn't pity her. I watched her, closely. She was unraveling by the second, trying to keep her composure, but the guilt was leaking through every inch of her skin. It was written in the way she couldn't meet my eyes. Daniel finally found his voice. "Bianca," he said, almost pleading. "It wasn't like—" But I didn't let him finish. "Don't," I said again, sharper this time. "Please don't insult me by pretending this was some kind of accident." I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, and yet my voice was eerily calm. That scared me. How calm I was. Maybe it was survival. Maybe it was shock. But I knew this wasn't the time for tears. I wasn't going to fall apart in front of them. They didn't deserve the satisfaction of seeing me break. I felt something shift inside me, a part of me closing, sealing shut. The woman who believed in fairy tales, in loyalty, in shared glances across candlelit dinners, she was gone. And what replaced her was someone sharper, someone clearer. I looked around the table, once filled with warmth and safety, now feeling like a stage where betrayal had been rehearsed for weeks. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the tile with a finality that cut through the silence. "You two made your choices," I said. "Now it's our turn." I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this night wasn't done unraveling. I handed the phone back to Daniel, but not like it was his, more like it was a piece of evidence I no longer needed to hold. His fingers hovered before taking it, as if the weight had tripled. Across the table, Victor finally stood too. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He just stared at Marie, his voice hollow when he finally asked, "How long have you been lying to both of us?" Her lips parted, but the answer never came. Maybe there wasn't one clean enough to give. I watched her eyes well with tears, but I didn't flinch. Funny how a person can cry in front of you and you feel absolutely nothing. That's what betrayal does. It scrapes the empathy right out of you. Daniel looked at me, reaching slightly, like he still believed there was something left to salvage. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, as if that line could stitch anything shut. I tilted my head, studying him. There was a time when I would have done anything to protect him, to believe him. But that time had expired, and he had signed the cancellation with every message he thought I'd never read. Victor and I walked toward the door together. Not because we planned to, just because neither of us wanted to stay in that room a second longer. Outside, the night air was cool, silent, almost too gentle for what had just happened. We sat on the curb without speaking. Two people cracked wide open in different ways. I rubbed my hands together, not from cold, but from nerves that hadn't caught up yet. After a while, I said it, not to comfort, not to justify, but just to speak the truth aloud. They didn't deserve us. Maybe that's the only thing we have in common tonight. The next few moments were a blur of movement and noise, chairs scraping, voices rising, the unmistakable sound of panic wrapped in shame. Back inside, I could hear Marie sobbing, loud, guttural, ugly sobs, the kind that beg for pity more than they show remorse. Victor didn't flinch. He just stared ahead, hands clasped tightly in front of him, as if anchoring himself to keep from floating off into rage. I knew that feeling. It's strange how betrayal doesn't explode. It echoes. You feel it in waves. It hums in your bones. And just when you think it's over, another wave hits. The front door opened. Daniel stepped out, eyes searching for me in the dark like he still had a place to stand. "Bianca," he called softly. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I didn't owe him the comfort of response. He walked closer, his voice tightening. "Please, we can talk. This isn't what it looks like." I let out a laugh, short, sharp, humorless. "It looks like you destroyed 2 homes, I said, not even looking at him. "For what? A few dirty messages? A thrill you'll forget by morning?" He didn't speak. What could he say? The truth had already been read aloud. He tried to sit next to me, but I stood before he could. I couldn't let him sit beside me, not after what he'd done. "You had everything," I told him. "Everything. And you traded it for lies and cheap moments you'll regret for the rest of your life." He looked like a child then, small, ashamed, but not nearly sorry enough. I turned to Victor, who had finally stood. Our eyes met, not in comfort but recognition. We had been partners in ignorance, and now we were survivors of the same storm. And we weren't going to stand there and drown. We started walking, Victor and I, side by side but not saying a word. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when the world outside doesn't know your life has just collapsed. I could hear the soft tap of my heels on the sidewalk, the rustle of leaves in the night air. Every sound felt sharper, like my senses had been rewired by betrayal. I glanced at Victor. He looked numb, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. And I realized we weren't walking away from people. We were walking away from illusions, from the comfort of stories we told ourselves. After a few blocks, we stopped. There was a little bench near the park, and we sat down without thinking. Still, we said nothing. But the silence felt different now. Not awkward, not cold. Just understood. I folded my arms across my chest, not for warmth, but to hold myself together. Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. I didn't know what to say, and I wasn't sure words would help anyway. So I did the only thing that felt right. I sat with him. No judgment. No forced comfort. Just presence. That's what I needed too. Someone who understood the cost of truth. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then I finally broke the silence. You know, I said softly, we were sitting around that table pretending everything was fine, pretending we were lucky. He nodded slowly, not lifting his head. And they were sitting there pretending not to be caught. That hit something inside both of us. I could feel it, the grief, the humiliation, the sharp, electric realization that the people we trusted most were capable of betrayal. And yet there we were, still breathing, still sitting, still deciding what to do next. We hadn't collapsed, not fully, not yet. I looked up at the sky, dark, indifferent, littered with stars that felt far too peaceful for a night like this. Funny how the world keeps turning even when yours has stopped. Victor finally sat back, rubbing his eyes. I thought we were solid, he murmured. We had problems, sure, but I never saw this coming. I nodded slowly. Me neither. I would have bet my life on Daniel. And I meant it. That was the part that stung the most. Not the messages, not even the betrayal. It was the absolute certainty I'd had in him, that I'd been so sure. We started talking, not about them, but about us. About how you build a life, one moment at a time, and then watch it crumble in seconds. About the little things we'd ignored, the signs we dismissed as stress or bad timing. We weren't trading stories. We were uncovering ruins. And yet, I didn't feel broken sitting there with him. I felt seen. We didn't need to fix anything that night. We just needed to feel less alone. And for the first time in hours, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't drowning by myself. The streetlights buzzed above us, casting a faint yellow glow. Victor looked over at me, eyes tired but steady. They didn't deserve us, he repeated, this time with weight. I nodded. Maybe not, but we deserved better than this. He offered a faint smile, not out of happiness, but agreement. And in that moment, on a quiet bench between what had been and whatever came next, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the part where everything started to change. The days that followed were strangely clear. I didn't fall apart. I didn't scream into pillows or drown in wine. I got organized. I got focused. Pain has a way of sharpening the mind when you decide not to let it destroy you. Victor and I kept in touch, not out of pity, but purpose. He wanted a divorce. He wanted truth on paper. And I wanted to make sure Marie couldn't twist the story into something that made her the victim. I had screenshots, timestamps, receipts, all lined up like chess pieces. I wasn't out for revenge. I was out for clarity. We'd meet at quiet cafes or in the corner booth of an old diner neither of us had ever noticed before. There was something oddly comforting about those meetings. Two people who had nothing left to hide. I helped him organize the evidence, coached him on what to say to his lawyer, even recommended mine. Not once did we flirt. Not once did it feel romantic. It was about truth. About reclaiming something we'd both lost. Dignity. I watched Victor slowly come back to himself. Less hollow each time. And that, in some small way, gave me strength too. Daniel texted, of course. He tried calling first, but I stopped answering after the third voicemail. Then came the long paragraphs, the apologies, the empty promises. I never meant to hurt you, he wrote. And I stared at that message for a long time before replying. That's the only thing you didn't do on purpose, I sent back. It was the truth. Sharp, short, final. He didn't reply after that. Or maybe he did, but I never checked again. The thread was closed, and in a strange way, I felt lighter for it. Marie was relentless. First came the silence, then the guilt texts, then the apologies dressed as excuses. She tried calling, messaging from unknown numbers, even sent me a letter. I didn't read it. I didn't need her words to know the shape of her regret. One day, I walked out to the mailbox and found an envelope with her handwriting. Shaky, familiar. I opened it. Inside was a long note and a bracelet she'd once borrowed from me. I read the first line. Then I tore it all in half and sent something back. a blank envelope with one line on a sticky note. "You broke your own life. I just made sure you didn't get to lie about it." That was all I had left to say. There was no satisfaction in that moment, no triumph, just peace. A quiet, grounded kind of peace. The kind that comes not from revenge, but from finally stepping off the stage someone else set for you. I wasn't performing forgiveness. I wasn't begging for an apology. I had stopped needing anything from her. Let her sit with her choices. Let her face herself in the mirror every morning. That was no longer my burden to carry, and that was the real revenge. Not loud, not messy, just complete. Victor understood this too. We talked about it one afternoon at the diner. "She keeps texting," he said, eyes on the sugar packet he was folding. "Says she didn't know what she was doing, that she lost herself." I sipped my coffee and shrugged gently. She knew. They both did. They just didn't think we'd find out. He nodded, and for the first time, smiled without sadness. Not because he was healed, but because he was healing, and so was I. We kept meeting, not every day, not out of routine, but when it felt necessary. When one of us needed to say, "You're not crazy," or "It wasn't your fault." Our lives were unraveling in different ways, but the ache was familiar. Some days we brought old photos, trying to make sense of what we'd missed. Other days we sat in silence, just sharing space without words. And slowly, almost quietly, we started choosing ourselves again. I went back to yoga. Victor picked up running. We stopped talking about Marie and Daniel so much. The air between us changed, lighter now. I never expected those small meetings to matter so much, but they did. They were like stitches after a deep wound, slow, careful, necessary. One afternoon, after his meeting with the lawyer, Victor looked at me and said, "You didn't just help me leave her. You helped me see her." That stayed with me, because it was true for both of us. I'd spent years loving a version of Daniel that never existed, or maybe one that had existed and disappeared long before I noticed. Seeing clearly, that was the real liberation. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. As the paperwork moved forward, I cleaned out my closet, literally and emotionally. I boxed up old anniversary cards, perfume bottles I no longer wore, the mug with our initials on it. There was a strange calm in letting go of objects that had held so many lies. I bought new sheets, new pillows. I started planning my move. Not away from Daniel. I had already done that in my mind. I was moving toward something now, a space that was mine, a life that didn't beg me to shrink. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally stepping into the woman I had once promised myself I'd be. The new place wasn't extravagant. It was simple, bright, and mine. Morning light poured through soft white curtains, and the walls breathed with quiet. I filled it slowly, not with things, but with intention. A plant in every corner, music in the background, books that felt like old friends. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think without the weight of someone else's moods pressing against me. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was sacred. I had built a home, not just a space, and every part of it reflected a woman who had stopped asking for permission to be happy. Victor finalized the divorce a few weeks later. We met to celebrate, not with champagne or loud declarations, but with calm smiles and a long walk through the city. We didn't talk much about the past. We didn't need to. It was already folded and placed in its box. "It's over," he said, more to himself than to me. I nodded. It's over. There was no rush to make something new out of what we'd shared. It wasn't romance we'd found. It was survival, solidarity, closure. The kind of bond that comes from surviving the same fire and carrying the same ash on your skin. We hugged that day. A real hug. Not brief or awkward. It was long, steady, a shared exhale. "You didn't just help me leave her," he said again. "You helped me see her." And I knew exactly what he meant. Sometimes love is not about what you build. It's about what you walk away from with your head held high. That hug didn't spark something new. It closed something old, and we both knew it. We weren't looking backward anymore. We were just free. Life didn't become perfect after that, but it became real, and that was better. I started doing things for no one but myself, cooking meals that made my kitchen smell like comfort, taking long walks without checking my phone, rearranging furniture until the room felt like a reflection of who I was becoming, not who I'd been. Some mornings I'd wake up and forget, just for a moment, that anything had ever gone wrong. And when I remembered, it didn't sting the same. It wasn't bitterness. It was a quiet kind of gratitude, for the lesson, for the clarity, for the freedom I never thought I'd need. One afternoon, I spotted Daniel on the street. I hadn't planned it, hadn't prepared myself. He looked thinner, older somehow, like the truth had started living in his skin too. He saw me, stopped mid-step. I saw his eyes widen, a flicker of surprise, then something softer. Regret, maybe. Or longing for a version of us that no longer existed. He opened his mouth like he might say something, but I didn't stop walking. I gave him a faint smile, not cruel, not cold, just final. That was all the closure either of us was going to get. And I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. Like I'd stepped out of a storm and dried myself in the sun. I had once given him everything, my trust, my time, my tenderness, and he'd spent it carelessly. But now I had reclaimed all of it. I wasn't the woman who sat at that dinner table anymore, full of confidence in a man who didn't deserve it. I was someone new, someone softer in some places, harder in others, but fully mine, and that was enough. I still think about that night sometimes, the dinner, the game, the unraveling. It plays back like a movie I didn't know I was starring in, one where the plot twists with every blink. But I don't replay it to suffer. I replay it to remember how far I've come. That version of me, passing plates and pouring wine, trusting blindly, she didn't disappear. She evolved. She grew teeth. She built boundaries. And she learned that sometimes strength isn't loud or angry. It's walking away quietly with everything they thought you'd never find again. I filled my days with people who made me laugh without weighing me down. I learned to love my own company. I stopped apologizing for needing space, for asking questions, for trusting my instincts. I even started painting again. Nothing good, nothing worth hanging. But the act of creating something from nothing reminded me that healing wasn't about returning to who I was. It was about meeting who I was becoming. And she didn't beg for crumbs. She set the table, even if it was just for one. Months passed. The seasons changed. The ache softened into memory. And one day, while brushing my fingers across the spine of a favorite book, it hit me. I had lost a husband, but I had helped a man find his freedom. And more importantly, I had found my own. And in a world that once demanded I shrink to fit someone else's story, I now wrote every chapter with both hands, on my terms, in my time, with no one left to please but me.